Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? Oh boy, except for that one person back there, a little subdued. We just came off a coffee break, so let's try that one more time. How's everybody doing this morning? That's what we want to hear at EWTS. As he said, my name is Ramon Llamas. I'm a research manager for devices and displays at IDC. And my task here for the next 45 minutes is to take you through hardware considerations for wearables. And I also want to say I have 4 goals this morning with the entire panel. And they go something like this. Number 1, want to educate. We want to learn as much as possible, pass on a lot of best practices from these 5 gentlemen onto you. Number 2, we want to enrich your experience. For those of you guys who are already in different stages of deployment of wearables, we want to affirm what you're doing and also provide you some things to think about, try to avoid some mistakes. Number 3, look to amuse you too. Something you don't hear much at the conferences, but we're looking to amuse and entertain because I talked to these guys beforehand. A lot of stories to tell, maybe a couple of lies. I'll leave that up to you. But this is one of the things that we're having a lot of fun with, and I hope that comes through too. And then finally, exchange, and that's probably my favorite part of this entire conference. We're not just about exchanging experiences and stories. We're here to exchange information, contacts. One of my favorite things doing at this conference is bumping into somebody and say, hey, you know what? I'm thinking about doing this. Do you know anybody at company XYZ I can get in touch with? Because that's really what this conference is all about, okay? So educate, enrich, amuse, and entertain, and exchange. So for me, myself, the task is going to be pretty easy. I've teed these guys up for success, and I'll ask them one at a time to come on over and have a seat in front of their own faces. So from left to right, Ken Fast from General Dynamics Electric Boat. Number 2, Alexander Vukovic from Duke Energy. Number 3, Drew Holbrooke from Gulfstream Aerospace. Next up, Todd Wynn from Rogers O'Brien Construction. And finally, Theo Gogoli from Atheer. Could we have a quick round of applause for the panelists? Okay, gentlemen. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. I'm going to ask each of you guys to contemplate them for a little bit, just as a way for the audience to understand who you are and what it is you do. And those 3 questions go like this. Number 1, what is it that you do? And please describe it in plain English so that, say, my 10-year-old daughter and my 80-year-old father can understand it. Okay. Number 2, whom do you serve? Whether it be internally, externally, or both. I'll leave that up to you. And then number 3, how do you measure success? Okay. So those 3 questions. What do you do? Whom do you serve? And how do you measure success? And right now, I'm going to buy some time for these gentlemen to think of their answers. And right now, I want to ask and poll the audience some questions of their own. It's important that you guys know who these guys are and where they come from and what they do. It also helps them understand who y'all are. So, by a show of hands, how many of you plan on flying on a plane in the next, let's say, 12 months? Raise them high. Don't be shy. You're not the only ones. Okay, good. Please put them back down. How many of you are going to be paying taxes this year? And before you answer, need I remind you, we are being videotaped in the back. Okay, you guys got that? Good. Number 3, how many of you are looking to power your homes and offices with electricity? Okay, very good, very good, very good. How many of you come from a city or a town where there's some major construction going on? Hospitals, hotels, civic centers, things of that ilk. Terrific. And finally, and this should be a slam dunk, how many of you guys are using wearables or thinking about using wearables at your company? All right, terrific. Now, if you raise your hand for just 1, 2, or all 5 of those, guess what? You're potential customers for each of these gentlemen up here. And one last question from me. I'm a New England guy. I'm from this area. How many of y'all are from out of town? Wow. 2 things. Number 1, welcome to Boston, Massachusetts. Hope you're loving it. The one city that ignores the letter R anytime we can. And if you don't understand what we're saying, please let us know and we'll provide a translator for you. Okay? Thank you. So, Ken, let's start with you. What is it that you do? Whom do you serve? And how do you measure success?
You want all 3 right away?
Sure, go ahead.
So I develop tools and new processes that for internal use. So it supports both our design customer we at Electric Boat, we design and build nuclear submarines for the U.S. Navy. So, but it's all, I make tools and processes, technology capabilities that serve both our design force internally and our construction people internally. So it's all focused on internal. So that's really the second part of my customer really is my own business. So there are people that at Electric Boat that develop software and processes that serve the submarine, the end user and the operational force, but all of my work is geared towards internal support to make our job go better.
Cool. And number 3, how do you measure success in that job?
Success is if I can, so I work in R&D, I develop new things, and I guess if anything actually gets implemented, to me that's success. I had one of my senior boss's boss that had to sign off on some of my R&D yearly reports. He one time looked at me across the table and said, "So how does it feel to work on things that nobody cares about?" And so if I make things that actually get used by other people and make their jobs easier, I count that as success. I mean, ultimately, we're trying to save the company money, and so we have over the years saved the company money. But
amen to that. Alex, you're up next. Same 3 questions, please.
Sure. So I'm sorry, I don't do anything exciting. My job is to make sure when you go home and flip the switch, the power is on. And if I have done my job really well, if the power doesn't come on, you think that something's wrong with the light bulb, not necessarily that you have lost the power. The customers that we serve, so Duke Energy is the energy company, so we provide power as well as gas to close to 9 million customers around the United States. So customers of Emerging Technologies Office that I work for, in external and internal, most of the time we work with the internal stakeholders, but that translates into customer satisfaction in other parts. Success. Success in our business, at least in Emerging Technologies, is we test concepts, we test technologies, we don't test the return on investment, we don't calculate the return on investment, we're not concerned about the financial part of this, or any technology for that matter. So what we do, once when we're done with testing, we transfer technology. So it's 3 cases. When we transfer technology to any stakeholder, either they want it right away everywhere, that is a success. It's another tool in the toolbox, but because they might do 3 or 4 other things, and this is another tool in the toolbox, 50% success, or they might shelve it, no success, right? So we try to strive towards, having them implemented fully as opposed to partially or not at all.
Terrific, thanks. Drew.
So I'm Drew Holbrooke. I work for Gulfstream Aerospace. I'm in what we've dubbed the Immersive Realities Group. We deal with cave technologies, virtual reality, and augmented reality. My job is really to play with cool tools. And we're in the R&D side of things. So we look at what's out there, what's coming, how can we implement it, where does it fit, if it fits in the business. So my customers are internal and external. Internally into the company, we work with engineering, sales and marketing, some training applications as well. Externally, we work with design teams to figure out how to best give our tools to our customers so they can help visualize what it is that we're trying to provide for them in a more useful case than just pretty pictures on a sheet of paper. Being able to provide the 3D content and really get a better immersive feel for what we're showing them. How do I measure success? We do a lot with virtual as well as the augmented side, of course, but if we don't make them sick, that's always a success point. Or having somebody use a controller and hand it right back to you because they don't know how it works. Just getting the interaction and then, like Ken and these guys said, if being in the R&D side, if we can take a pilot and get it to go into the next step to where it can be enterprise rolled out, then that's a success from that standpoint.
Cool, thank you. Todd.
Todd Wynn with Rogers O'Brien Construction. So I research, I create, I implement new technologies for the built world, much like this building that we're in today. My customer is the worker with the wrench in hand that stands between your beautiful design and the execution of it success. So constantly trying to find ways to make the lives of those in the field better, easier, safer. And I measure success when those workers come to me and ask for more. I think there's many times we are so focused on what we're pushing and we're not realizing what's being pulled. And there's many technologies out there that are being pulled, and that's what I love to focus on, is when I have a worker come up to me and say, you made my life easier, my work easier, and that's how I measure.
Terrific. And Theo?
So I'm Theo Gogoli with Atheer. I run the day-to-day marketing for Atheer, where we do enterprise productivity and efficiency solutions for the enterprise, obviously on wearables and smart glasses, but primarily on a platform-agnostic solution. And my customers are all of you out here. Some of you already know you're my customers, and we're working together to deploy products and pilots. A lot of you probably don't know that you'll be my customers yet. Hopefully we can change that. And I measure success by two ways. One is educating the marketplace and having the marketplace know what is possible and what is available and what is real today. And also by taking my existing customers and growing them. Because everybody's going to start small. Everybody's going to start small with a single use case and a single pain point, but they have tens, dozens of pain points within that same company, within that same organization that I can help them grow. And that's really what I focus on.
And what I really like about having this panel of professionals together is that not only are we all making sense and deploying wearables at our workspace, take a look at some of the pain points and some of the challenges that they're facing. For a lot of us, we're all trying to champion wearables in our workplace one way or another at various levels. And sometimes it's being met with absolute success. Sometimes, there's a lot more hand-wringing and a lot of politicizing that's going on. For others like Alex, I like picking on Alex the most because he's a lot of fun to do that with, by the way. He handles mission-critical type stuff. Working in the energy and electricity field, they're the first to hear about it in case something doesn't happen. And if you consider, what used to happen before to fix, a power grid or circuit or anything, compared to what it is like now with a wearable device, and he's going to tell a little bit about that in a little bit. There's a lot more going towards that. And then finally, with Theo over there at the end, with Atheer and many other companies, these guys are acting as kind of like the connective tissue, connecting the wearable experience and a lot of the software with a lot of those back-end servers and a lot of that data of information. So it's not just a device or a piece of hardware that's being handed to you. In the end, it's pretty much a solution. And that's really what we're aiming for today. So as we go into the main part of the discussion of, what is the hardware consideration for all these guys? Again, I have 3 questions for each of you, and we'll take turns, going through each of it, okay? And the first question is like this. Number 1, what are you trying to accomplish with a wearable device? Number 2, again, whom are you trying to serve with specifically a wearable device? And finally, how are you measuring success with a wearable? So similar to what we did before, now we're just drilling harder into, what is it with a wearable? And finally, what is that hardware consideration with whatever solution you've been considering and eventually what you've decided upon? And for that one, Alex, you're going to be the first one up.
Sure. So we started doing this as a pilot project back in 2014. How many people in the room have been doing this since 2014? Okay, few, right? So I'll be honest with you, I have quite a few projects, but this one has given me the most headache out of all of them. And when we started, we didn't have as many companies as today, and we didn't have software providers, hardware providers, etc. So when you work in utility environment, it's a little bit maybe different than in the other environments because we have to follow certain rules. And some of those rules require minimum approach distance. So we can't just give these glasses to everybody and let them go, especially linemen. When you're working on energized lines, you have to be within certain distance from the line if you have any metal object. So you can't have your ring on all the other stuff. Second of all, we do require in electric utility everybody to wear safety glasses. And when you take a look at a lot of hardware offerings today, they're not safety rated. Another thing is we have something that's called EHS, Environmental Health and Safety. So before any tool or any, in this case, smart glass gets approved, it has to go through their thorough review. And pretty much we have a panel of 5 people that look at all this stuff, and they all have to agree that, yes, this is okay to implement before it gets implemented in the system. In terms of glasses, we have probably 30 different departments inside utility that can use them. So there is no silver bullet. So to be honest with you, I have tried every single glass, other than maybe 1 or 2, since 2014 that has been on the market. And depending on what use cases and what kind of information is trying to be displayed, everybody's preference is different. So pretty much every single glass that exists today, there's somebody in the company that prefers one of those.
Now, on the phone, we talked about the entire see what I see experience with glasses, because you mentioned safety glasses, everybody's got to have them. Could you talk about what that consideration was like for you in terms of, say, resolution and you know, speed and you know, trying to get you know, especially frames per second in case it's a video?
Sure. So I actually do have a presentation that's very topic. I'm a bad marketing guy, but I will tell you, I have about 20-minute presentation, all that stuff later on, so you can see all of the challenges. But I do have to tell you that we have tested probably 4 glasses for every single, more or less every single use case that we have seen. We have tested different softwares, different communications, and different hardware. The best thing that we have ever gotten is download speeds about 0.2 seconds and upload to 0.4 seconds. That is the best. The biggest challenge that we had, communications, because you only have chance to make this thing work once, because any successive try because of something doesn't work is probably not going to be well received. So we had a lot of communication drops, even where the case you might have 4 or 5 bars. Second of all, the camera most consistent that we got is that 720p probably doesn't work well for remote assistance. That's what we got from the field personnel. On the software side, you don't want to see frozen screens. And like my coworker says, it's always, you're going to hear a lot of, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Not if you hear it, because a lot of times you just lose communications. This becomes multiplied when you're in the generation plane where you get inside where there is no cell connection, so you have to rely on the internal network. Now these are the challenges just with pilot. Challenges with enterprise solutions 10 times more that I really don't have the time to explain all of them now, but I'll explain those during the presentation.
Great, thanks. Let's move on to Drew. Drew, tell us your response of what you're trying to accomplish, whom you're trying to serve, and how you're measuring success with a wearable device, with what you're doing at Gulfstream, please.
So what we're trying to accomplish is finding ways to help improve and better our employees and to make them more efficient at their jobs through the use of wearables or whatever it may be. It provides a lot of benefits to it. There are some of the downfalls, like Alexander was saying, that the challenges that every company will face, especially in security and things like that, safety concerns with the smart glasses and stuff like that. What we're trying to, go ahead and repeat the questions again.
Oh, sure. What you're trying to accomplish with a wearable device, whom you are trying to serve with a wearable, and then finally how you're going to measure success with a wearable device.
So whom we're trying to serve, our group specifically is trying to serve our engineering community and our customers that come in to purchase our aircraft. So I'll give a simple POC that we've run. When customers come in to purchase the aircraft, they go through material selections, and each aircraft we sell is vastly different than the next because no two are going to be the same, especially in interiors. And when you're paying $60, $70 million for a private jet, you expect to have exactly what you're seeing. So we're actually exploring the virtual space to be able to bring the customer and take it to the customer, not just have them come to Savannah where we're located, but go to the customer with a VR headset, be able to show them their cabin configuration or maybe a few options if they're trying to really narrow it down, and give them a different perspective on what the aircraft will actually look like when they take delivery of it. Because one thing we don't want is for them to see it during the rendering and during the design phase, and then when you actually get the aircraft, it looks completely different and it's not what you wanted it to do. Maybe a color's off here or there. And how we measure that success is if we can help even one customer in a customer satisfaction situation to where they're happy with the extra tools that we provided to them to be able to help during that selection process, that they'll want to come back and buy another aircraft from us. And have that customer loyalty, and the brand image is improved by it. So that's how.
Now, just before coming up on stage, Drew and I were talking about, how do we add some, context to this and some numbers. And so just for, and keep me honest here, Drew,
Okay.
Gulfstream Aerospace does about, in excess of about, let's say, 100, 150 airplanes per year.
Yeah, so we're not Boeing. We're not producing thousands of aircraft. We produce somewhere between 100 and 150 a year. Our aircraft range from 30 million to 70 million. They're Fortune 500 companies, individuals. We hold up to 19 passengers in our airplane, so it's not like we're producing the same aircraft for everybody that comes down the line and just rolling them out like the cars. So in our design process, each interior is going to be custom and hand-stitched for that customer's reference for specific specifications.
Perfect. I'll take 2.
Okay, go ahead. We'll sign you up for
Thanks.
that. We'll hold you to that one.
Now, just go for, let's get this from a perspective of, before and after. So let's say you go through the entire process, you bring somebody down to headquarters in Savannah, Georgia, and they take a look at it and they say, I don't like this, please change this, I want this to be bluer, I want this to be redder, I want the logo to be located 6 feet down.
Yep.
And then you got to go through that entire process of rejiggering that design.
Right.
And now you're doing it with virtual reality.
Right.
Pick whichever device you want, an Oculus, an HTC, etc. What kind of savings in terms of time, in terms of cost, in terms of turnaround on projects are you seeing as a result?
So we're still in the POC phase, so I can't necessarily say that. But from feedback we're receiving is that when you have a customer who, if we can make it look photo real, or as real as we can, and this comes down to the hardware. One of the things we're hitting limitations on is resolution in the headsets and things like that. That's always a complaint, is the resolution and color clarity and things like that. But being able to take them through that process to where now they can get a better understanding and feel to where when they actually get the aircraft that it's more, well, this is pretty much exactly what I saw. For us, it comes back to the customer satisfaction. So there might not be a direct ROI tied to it, but if we have a happy customer, then more than likely we can have a repeat customer. So
in that case, I'll take 3.
There you go.
Terrific, thanks. Todd, whereas the first 2 guys talking about what it's like to work with AR and VR, what you're doing over there with Rogers O'Brien is very different. And
Definitely.
Go for it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, Ramon. It is different. We are the epitome of a deskless workforce. We build all different types of structures. As Joe mentioned yesterday on the panel, every new project is a prototype. If it wasn't, then all of our buildings would look the same. Our biggest need and passion for leveraging wearables is the accessibility of information. We have mountains and mountains of documents. I mean, think of just this projector here. If you go buy this, it comes with a product manual, a maintenance manual, warranty list. Well, now look at everything in this building. Thousands, tens of thousands of documents, and we have to be able to easily consume that information to make quality level decisions on the fly. We're building in these extremely tight schedules. And then at the same time, we're in a very litigious industry, so we're wanting to capture everything. Anything that we cover up in construction, we need a photo. A minimum photo. Now we're doing 360 panoramics, as well as reality capture, laser scans, using photogrammetry. But we want to know what's behind so that we can always prove it to an inspector, to the owner. It's a very high level of risk in our industry. And then safety. I cannot stress enough that a lot of what we've talked about is throughout this conference is we've seen some great safety yesterday, of course, with Albert and showing the lighting up vest safety has a there's a huge opportunity in our industry. I think I said this last year, but in the United States alone, 3 people will pass today in my industry. And that's unacceptable. And there's a huge opportunity. We have a very dangerous site. We need that wearable device to be a guardian angel for our users. So it starts right now. We've really started with capturing and accessing information, but we really are excited about when it comes to biometric monitoring, understanding when we're out of Texas, it gets hot. Right? We get 110 degrees on a pan deck when we're pouring concrete. We actually have one person on water watch. They are paid to stand there and make sure that everyone's consuming enough water. It's insane. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. When it comes to considerations for hardware, of course it's got to be rugged. I mean, we build in the rain at times. We build in high winds, gypsum dust. It gets into everything. Things break easily on our job sites. It's got to be non-intrusive. It cannot disrupt the worker. We are a room full of early adopters. We're all here today because we are on the tip, the cutting edge of what's next. But the workers in my industry are not. They are doing their job and they want to go home to their families. So it can't be intrusive. And if it is, it better be 10x in value somewhere else. We can't just give them a device and say, hey, this is 2x better than your phone, but it's now 15 more pounds of weight. We're already carrying material, and I can go on and about hardware considerations. I don't want to take up the time, but there's definitely this standpoint of, I really want one thing for you guys to take with is how can we do a better job of making wearables invisible to the user? These should be devices that amplify our abilities and we can forget about. How many do you see phones anymore? No, they're invisible. Do you see watches on people anymore? No, they're invisible. These are wearables that we now have adopted as part of our lives. When a lot of the wearables we're seeing at this conference and going forward, they stand out. I'm challenging all of us here. We need to keep fighting to make these devices a little more non-intrusive and a whole lot more valuable.
Now, before we can gather here today, you and I were on the phone, and you talked about some of the work that you and your team have been doing with exoskeletons. Now, full disclosure, I'm a wannabe construction nerd. I love this old house. Born and raised here in Massachusetts. Thank you very much. But you're doing some neat stuff with exoskeletons. Well, you talk maybe not as invisible as you were just saying, but
no, not invisible at all. But that's something that takes it to a whole new level. To me, that's the ultimate wearable for my industry, right? I mean, we are doing manual labor. We are lifting materials. We're pulling guys off of work and saying, "Hey, come help me lift this." So the exoskeleton is definitely, it's one of those things. 3 years ago, if you asked me about it, I'd say, oh, that's years away. That's science fiction. That's Sigourney Weaver and Alien, right? It's not. It's here today. I mean, you can see in the exhibit hall, Russ Angold with Exobionics is here. If you have not seen what they're doing, check it out. That's been basically our experience, is trying out they have a vest that will allow an electrician to sit and tie wire for hours at a time. The things we take for granted is when you walk by a construction site and you see that electrician tying wires above their head. Guess how long they're doing that in a day? Just try holding your hands up for more than 30 minutes and see how you feel. This vest allows them to actually raise their hands and hold it in place comfortably. It's when you start actually providing something that's making someone's life physically easier, not just more efficient, but physically to where they're not aching and in pain, then it truly is a pull technology. And Russ told me something yesterday that blew my mind. I always considered the exosuit as something that would just amplify the worker's abilities to be stronger and have more stamina. But he said, no, Todd, we're going to save lives as well. We're going to be able to put sensors in these devices that when they reach out and there's an electrical panel that's energized, we're going to be able to stop their arm. And it just blew my mind. And that's the truth. It's here. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I heard it yesterday, cobot, not just robots, but where we actually start augmenting our workers themselves. And it's an exciting time.
So far, if you've taken, paying attention to the panelists, we heard things about invisibility, safety, customization, see what I see, and then, falling within the specifications of, electric conduction and safety within Alex's industry. So we're covering a lot of different areas, and that's just 3 speakers. So now I'm just going to shift next to Theo, who takes a very different approach, come from Atheer being a supplier for a number of companies here in the room and elsewhere.
So as a supplier, with wearables, we're trying to enable a lot of the use cases that these guys are trying to tackle, which is the see what I see functionality, so that you can transport your expert instantaneously to the workforce, to the field, to the factory, wherever they need to be, without having to get on a plane, without having to buy a $2,000 ticket to go across the ocean. Also having guided step-by-step instructions so that you save upfront on your training. You have very detailed work instructions that you make sure your workers are not skipping. You can also generate reports out of that in terms of making sure, when you're looking at the construction side of things, you know that this was constructed correctly because your worker went through the 10 different steps. You know he took 10 to 20 seconds for each of those steps. That's what you expect, and you have it all time-stamped and recorded. So that's kind of one of the aspects that we provide with wearables. The other is we're really trying to make the wearables disappear, and not in a David Copperfield kind of way on the hardware side, but more on a user experience side of way. Right now, a lot of the wearables out there today, people have to stop and think about how they use them. And when they stop and think about how they use them, they remember they're there. And so how can we, on the software side, on the experience, on the interaction side, what can we do to make people forget that they are wearing a pair of smart glasses and that there is, a box or some text floating in front of them, and that they interact with it very naturally, that they're not thinking about using the device anymore, they're just using the device. So that's kind of what we're doing. My users are people out in the field, whether they're maintaining things, they're inspecting things, they're doing repair. They're also in your own factory. If you're like Peggy and Agco and you're manufacturing, a very large piece of equipment, that manufacturing process has very detailed steps. You want to automate that. If you're on a high volume manufacturing line and you're pumping out, 1,000 big gulp cups a second, doing maintenance on that manufacturing line is going to be very costly for you, because anytime you're doing maintenance, you're taking that line down and you need to bring it back up online as quickly as possible. And as I said, in the end, success with wearables is really kind of delivering productivity to the enterprise and making it as transparent as possible. Putting that tool in the toolbox and making sure that that tool is easy to use.
Now, Theo, you have a very special seat compared to these other four gentlemen, because as the software provider, as the connective tissue between user and enterprise backend servers and et cetera, you're seeing what people are doing with their wearable device, whether it be a pair of glass, HoloLens, et cetera. You have a lot of interesting insight from all your customers, both here and those who are here who are about to be your customers, and outside this room, as to what they come back to you and say, what, this is what I really like about my hardware, and this is what I really dislike. Without disclosing names, because we're going to protect the innocent here, what have you heard, both the highs and the lows in terms of hardware considerations from your clients?
So from a hardware point of view, the biggest takeaway is there isn't one best piece of hardware for you, and this applies to everybody out there. And even within your organization, there are going to be different pieces of hardware, different smart glasses, different tablets, different wearables that are going to be best for those different use cases. And kind of identifying those needs and identifying those concerns as they relate to the job that your person is doing on the ground, right? If you have somebody who's going in a warehouse who's picking a box off a shelf, he doesn't need, a $3,000 HoloLens. He just needs something closer to a Vuzix M300, a smaller device, monocular, that just gives him the information that he needs. And the same thing is we're seeing a lot of people in the oil and gas space they're clamoring for intrinsically safe devices. And we all know that intrinsically safe glasses aren't quite there yet. But there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of the process with intrinsically safe tablets or intrinsically safe phones. Starting to get the workflows, get the process, get the training in place on these devices, or look at another use case that may not be in that intrinsically safe environment, so that you start rolling out wearables in your enterprise, because it's going to have a lot of knock-on effects on IT, on training, on your back-end integrations with your HR system. So kind of understanding where not just your pie-in-the-sky use case that all of the early adopters here are thinking of, but what is the most approachable use case for my business today? And for that particular guy, what is the best device for him? And it's not just a spec race where I say, I want the fastest thing possible. It's what is going to make his job the easiest. And it's going to be very different for each one of us. And depending on the use case and depending on who is using that device, it's going to be different.
Great, thanks, Theo. Ken, Same 3 questions.
Yeah, so wearables, yeah, I guess you have to, I would say that we need to step back and redefine what a wearable computer is, right? So, because we have this notion, you know, some kind of headset thing. So my first wearable computer was a slide rule. So I finished my first 1.5 years of engineering school with a slide rule, straight, 1 foot. And then my second wearable computer was an HP 25C. Wow. So program 25-step programmable. Probably almost as powerful as the computer they landed on the moon with, but a little battery-powered thing. And then I think it ties in with mobile computing. So we've done, over the years, we've looked at, you know, I had a Palm Pilot, original Palm Pilot, and Pocket PC devices, little iPac things. There used to be a conference, I don't know if it's still convened anymore, but there was an international symposium on wearable computers. It was more of an academic conference, but back in the day, there were people with, you know, wristwatches that were running Linux with an LCD screen that you could actually interact with. That was back in the late 90s, actually. So that, you know, 20 years ago. So wearable computers, what we're doing with wearables right now, it's really about mobile computing. So we're putting some tablets out on the shop floor. It's not very exciting, but it's takes, you know, big company. We move very slowly, so it's an exciting thing for us, getting data to the shop floor, 3D models, even drawing information without having to flip through a lot of paper. So you have automated indexing. You can find the right information just with a click. We're doing the work that I'm doing. We're doing some augmented reality. For manufacturing, so it's overlay of installation location information, and we're using the Google Tango tablets. So we're actually using tablets, not a wearable headset kind of a wearable. We're looking at headset devices for other applications, but the work that I've done is mostly with tablets, and the people, you know, there's obviously, if you're doing work, you're going to want to have your hands free at some point, but there's a trade-off. So I usually say that if you need constant guidance for what you're doing, so every step you need information fed to you, then you need some kind of a headset display so you can work with your hands and you get information. If you only need 2 minutes of instruction, but then you're going to work for half an hour, and you don't need instruction while you're working, you just need a certain amount of guidance, and then you're going to do a long amount of work, then a tablet is actually a good thing, because you get your information, you put it down, now you're completely unobstructed because you're not wearing anything. So there's kind of a trade-off there. And then on the AR side, with the glasses, because the reality part of the augmented reality is now see-through, so it's the real world, but the overlay display is tied to these physical glasses, which are somewhat loosely fitted to your face. Now, if you're doing something that requires good registration, if it's just information augmentation, so that, you know, the typical glass use case where you're adding a certain amount of information, it's in context, but it's not registered precisely, then that's fine. But if it needs to register precisely with the real world, the fact that the glasses can move, it's not hands-free, it's one-hand-free, because you're holding the glasses, and then there's usually this really small exit pupil, so you're kind of doing this with the glasses, so you can actually see the thing that you're looking at while you're trying to work with the one hand. Whereas the tablet, because the camera and the display are fixed, they're hard as the device, the registration works really well, assuming that your tracking works. So your display, your reality is now video, but the video is matched with that camera because it's all in one solid piece of hardware. So the registration actually works really well, and it doesn't shift as you move the device around. And your brain does the translation of, you know, as it moves through space. So there's the wearables kind of a, you know, it's a big, broad spectrum.
It is a big, broad spectrum, and, you know, the best part of it is that there's always a lot of different spaces to play. Because when you and I were on the phone before this and you talked about, hey, manufacturing supports with wearables and you're trying to work something in 3 dimensions and you can have something on your tablet and stay still, but if you can have something over here that kind of guides you step by step, something that Theo is trying to champion with Atheer, well, now you got the best of both worlds. So it kind of speaks to that modularity of ways to work. In the waning minutes that we have here on stage, I'm going to ask you guys one last question, and each of you guys take a chance at answering this. And it's this: what is that one pearl of wisdom you can impart to the audience, based on your years, months, etc., of experience, that you would pass on to anybody, whether they're getting started in the middle of something or something specific to your industry that could be leveraged to many other people? What would that one pearl of wisdom be? And for that, I'm going to start at that end and work this way. So Theo, you're up.
So my pearl of wisdom for everybody out here would be to try out all the devices and try out all the use cases within your enterprise, because you're effectively creating this matrix of all the possible devices, all the way from wrist worn, from a watch to a tablet to smart glasses and all the varieties of tablets. And on the other axes, you have all the different use cases in your enterprise. It could be the field worker, it could be the supervisor, it could be somebody who's doing QA, it could be somebody who's doing manufacturing. And trying out all the different devices and looking at all the different use cases, you're going to understand where those sweet spots are of this particular use case using this particular device is going to have a really good benefit today without me having to do a lot of work. But this other one, which might have looked promising initially, is going to take a lot more effort to get it to fruition. So kind of having an open mind and looking at where your low-hanging fruit are first is what I would suggest.
Yeah, I'd say my pearl of wisdom, keep it simple. Keep it simple. And I challenge all of you to ask yourselves a question. Are you wanting to implement wearables in your organizations for the benefit of you, or is it for the benefit of the worker? Because that is going to be the deciding factor of your success. Whenever you're looking at, this is going to help my bottom dollar, this is going to make us more efficient, this is going to give me a dashboard of data that I've never had, none of that helps the person that's wearing it. Focus on who's wearing the device and make their day better, and then you will see success.
Drew.
So my pearl of wisdom is to keep pushing. This is an innovative field, but there are applications that range from anywhere from conceptual design all the way through production to product support, and you just have to keep pushing. As we've talked, there's roadblocks everywhere, from security to IT to whatever else it may be. There's political barriers, but you have to just keep pushing through them. I've heard no quite a few times, but I always come up with it. Well, it's possible. There is always another option. There's ways to go to get to where we need to be. So you just have to keep pushing on it, and eventually the walls come down, the doors open up, and before you know it, you realize, well, hey, look what we just did, and let's just keep pushing with it.
Alex.
So if you take a look at my picture above and take a look at me, you might think I'm not the same person, right? So that was taken 13 years ago, right? So in that light, don't believe everything that you see in videos, because when you see the video, you don't know what's possible and doable today, what's tomorrow, and what's 5 or 10 years from today. I have applied that. I'm a power systems engineer by my background, so I have seen that with a lot of devices. This is just another device or another technology. So I'll be honest with you, unless I test it, unless I prove that it works, videos are great, but they are a marketing tool, right? But that's just for me. Until I try it, until I prove that it works, I don't believe anything. Even if my father had, directed the video or whatnot.
Terrific. Ken.
Yeah, so as I thought about this, I thought I think what you need to do is you need to maintain this sort of childlike excitement about what you're working on, that kind of echoing Drew's comments about if you work in a big company, things can take a long time to implement or forever, depending on what they are. And if you are not excited, if you're not interested in doing what you do to make things happen, then it's probably not going to move forward. These are not things that your boss is going to come by your desk one day and say, hey, can you implement this mobile, wearable computer solution for this problem that we have down in the shipyard? No, that doesn't happen, right? So you need to just continue to push on and be excited about what you do and see little successes and get other people excited about it, and eventually something might come out of it on the far end.
And on the far end, and as you guys can see all across this panel, not only have you made it to the far end, you've crossed that finish line, and you've crossed many other finish lines and milestones along the way. So congratulations and thank you for your stories. We have a few minutes for some Q&A. So around the room, as we've done with previous panels up here, raise your hand if you have a question. There is a roving reporter with a microphone, and he will take it. So we will have it in the back.
Scott Larson from Delta Airlines. I being a little north of 45, bifocal lenses and progressive. I've noticed all the devices out here, tend to be up out of the focal point of where my glasses I should be reading. How are you guys addressing that, or how have you worked with it when you've done implementations?
It's a great question.
All right, so I'll take that one. Dealing with people who need corrective lenses is obviously a huge challenge for smart glasses. It's been addressed, or I've seen it addressed in a couple different ways. One of the approaches taken, for example, by our friends over at Epson has been to make the devices large enough to fit over your prescription glasses. Another approach that I've seen with, I believe, ODG, and one that we had tried initially was to work with Rochester Optical to do drop-in inserts on the inside of the lens. That does assume a form factor that has that tolerance to fit in there. But I think if you look at it long term, until they become common enough that that the corrective lens can be baked into the device, it is going to be a problem that edge cases for people who have bi or trifocals or who have very thick lenses are going to have quite a hard time getting around. And that's something that we're going to have to work around as an industry, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would just add to that, with a tablet you can do so I also need glasses to do all the setup, but once the app's running, as long as your arms are long enough, you can do that supermarket thing that, yeah, I can read that.
Just up front.
Yeah, James Gordy, RealWear. From your experience and all the knowledge you've gained, what do you think are the biggest barriers to scaling wearable computing in the enterprise from a hardware perspective?
Who wants to tackle that one?
I would just say that we haven't faced that yet because we haven't been successful enough to have to scale anything. That'll be next year.
Mm-hmm. I would say from scaling it up, just from looking at it, and I know Peggy's taking it on a bigger scale than a lot of us are, being able to track them, being able to maintain them. What happens when they fail? Are we going to have an IT department that helps support the wearables? Are we shipping them back, getting new replacements? What happens when a guy drops them in Jet A fuel and you've just lost them? I mean, it's just going to be maintaining and tracking on that large of a scale and keeping up with them. So that's one more inventory that you have to track at that point.
And on our side, like I said, we have tried different ones. I can tell you, based on the feedback that we have received, we really think from the hardware, it'd be better if cell phone was integrated with it rather than trying to tether to your phone, Wi-Fi, and any one of those. It's sometimes a lot of frustration when you drop the signal constantly. That is one. Second of all, it has to be safety rated. Now, I don't know on top of my head safety rating for the glasses, at least the electric utility. But if they're not safety rated, then you have to have safety rated glasses over those glasses. That might somehow alter what you're trying to do, etc. And then nobody's talking about this stuff. I haven't heard, but what are the standards when it comes to building these glasses to begin with? And number two, what kind of security authentication do you have implementing that stuff? And I don't know how easy or how hard it is to do, but those are some things.
And with that, I thank you for your attention and participation for the Fast 45 Minutes. I'd like to thank our panelists. Could you give them one more round of applause, please?